To truly reach an avoidant heart, the first and most crucial step is understanding the landscape of fear that governs their inner world. You see, avoidant individuals are not cold or unfeeling by nature. They are terrified of emotional exposure. They have learned, often through early life experiences, that closeness can lead to vulnerability, and vulnerability in their experience can lead to pain. So when they pull back, when they create distance, it isn't rejection. It's self-preservation. And this is the paradox. The very distance they create to protect themselves is the same barrier that keeps connection at bay. Understanding this fear isn't just intellectual, it's experiential. You must imagine the world through their eyes for a moment. To them, intimacy is not just a romantic ideal. It's a potential threat. It triggers a cascade of old anxieties and memories, and their instinct is to flee. Now, most people respond to this pullback by chasing, by trying harder, by asking more questions, by demanding proof of affection. And every time that happens, the avoidance defenses tighten and the gap grows. So your first job isn't persuasion, it's observation and comprehension. Step back and see the patterns. The way they retreat when conversations become emotionally charged, the way they resist commitments, the subtle signals of withdrawal. When you recognize these behaviors as fear responses rather than personal rejection, a remarkable thing happens. You stop taking it personally. Once you grasp this, you can interact from a place of awareness rather than reaction. Awareness is powerful because it shifts the energy of your interactions. Instead of triggering their fear, you begin to create a container of safety around them. You offer consistency without pressure, attention without suffocation, and interest without desperation. You are no longer chasing. They are now free to choose connection at their own pace. And here's the essential truth. Fear can only be met with empathy, never with force. When you understand their fear, you replace judgment with patience. And judgment is the very thing that keeps them guarded. Philosophically, this is where your own growth comes into play. Understanding an avoidant heart forces you to reflect on your own attachment patterns, your own relationship with need, with control, with patience. It asks you to be emotionally literate, to cultivate a presence that is not reactive, but grounded. And this presence is magnetic. People, especially those who fear intimacy, are drawn to stability. When you show that you are steady, calm, and understanding, you become a mirror of safety, an environment in which avoidance can gently relax. So before you attempt to connect, before you try to convince them of your loyalty or chase their attention, pause. Step into their world. Observe without judgment. See the patterns of fear for what they are. Recognize that withdrawal is not about you, but about the architecture of their heart that has been built over decades of survival. And in doing so, you prepare the ground for every other step. Boundaries, communication, curiosity, patience, to take root successfully. The power of this first step is often underestimated, yet it is the cornerstone of all connection with an avoidant heart. Without it, every strategy, every act of love risks triggering retreat instead of closeness. But with it, you hold the key to transformation. Empathy replaces frustration, patience replaces desperation, and understanding replaces the need to chase. And here's the truth to carry with you. No heart ever opens under pressure, but every heart has the capacity to open when it feels truly understood. Once you've stepped into their world and understood the landscape of fear that governs an avoidant heart, the next critical step is to anchor yourself in self-respect. This is where most people stumble. They think connection is about convincing, chasing, or proving themselves worthy. But the truth is far more counterintuitive. The strongest way to reach an avoidant heart is not to pursue relentlessly, but to cultivate a life, a presence, and an energy that commands respect effortlessly. Self-respect is more than a personal boundary. It's a declaration. It says, I know my worth and I will not diminish myself for someone else's fear. When you operate from this space, you are no longer negotiating for their attention. Instead, you are offering them a mirror of what real stability and emotional integrity look like. avoidants in their core are highly sensitive to desperation. They can sense the subtle tremors of neediness, the quiet tremor of self-doubt, and it triggers their instinct to withdraw. Conversely, when they encounter someone who is whole, grounded, and self-assured, it disrupts their usual patterns. This is where attraction begins. Not the frantic, chasing kind, but the magnetic, undeniable pull that comes from strength. Think of self-respect as both shield and beacon. The shield protects you from the exhaustion of emotional chasing, from the anxiety of constantly seeking reassurance. It keeps you centered when they pull back, reminding you that your value is not dependent on their proximity, approval, or affection. The beacon, meanwhile, radiates a subtle invitation. I am complete. I am whole. If you choose to connect, it will be on equal footing. That's an incredibly rare and refreshing experience for someone who has spent a lifetime guarding against closeness. It makes them pause. It makes them curious. It makes them reconsider the habitual walls they've built around themselves. Philosophically, this is about reclaiming your sovereignty. Many of us unconsciously give our power away in relationships, especially with someone who is avoidant. We measure our worth by how much we can pull them in, how much we can appease, how much we can sacrifice. But true connection never comes from diminishing yourself. It comes from embracing yourself fully. By prioritizing your own self-respect, you model a dynamic that is both attractive and non-threatening. You are saying without words, I am here, fully without compromise. And you are free to meet me here or not. This freedom, the lack of pressure, is precisely what allows an avoidant heart to soften over time. And there's a deeper layer here, one that resonates with the principles of emotional intelligence. Self-respect is a reflection of your internal alignment. When your thoughts, words, and actions are consistent with your values, when you honor your needs as much as theirs, you cultivate a quiet, unshakable confidence. That confidence is magnetic. It is the soil in which trust can grow, patience can take root, and intimacy can eventually flourish. So the lesson is clear. Never sacrifice your integrity or self-worth in the pursuit of someone else's attention. Respect yourself, stand firm in your boundaries, and allow your presence to speak louder than any plea, any chase, or any demand. When you do this, you shift the dynamic completely. You no longer chase, they are drawn. You no longer plead, they are intrigued. You no longer try to fix. They begin to see a model of stability that quietly invites them to lean in. And the truth that will guide you. No heart ever opens to someone who undervalues themselves. But every heart responds to someone who honors themselves. Once you've understood the landscape of fear and anchored yourself in self-respect, the next crucial step in reaching an avoidant heart is mastering communication without pressure. This is where most people stumble because instinctively we equate closeness with urgency. We believe that if we love someone enough, if we ask enough questions, if we express enough longing, we can break down the walls they built around themselves. But in reality, this is the exact opposite of what draws an avoidant heart. Pressure, demands, and ultimatums trigger the very response we want to avoid. Withdrawal. Communicating without pressure isn't about withholding your feelings or pretending everything is effortless. It's about creating a space in which honesty, curiosity, and patience can exist without fear. Imagine a conversation where every word is an invitation rather than a test, where your tone conveys interest but not desperation, where your questions arise from genuine curiosity rather than a need for reassurance. In that space, the avoidant person can engage freely without feeling trapped, and freedom, paradoxically, is what encourages connection. Here's the psychological truth. Avoidants are hyper-aware of emotional dynamics. They don't just hear your words. They feel your energy, your expectations, your anxieties. When communication carries pressure, even subtly, it triggers an automatic self-protection mechanism. They retreat not because they don't care, but because they feel unsafe. But when your communication is calm, clear, and non-demanding, it signals that connection does not threaten your identity or theirs. It communicates reliability, stability, and emotional intelligence, all qualities that they unconsciously seek but rarely allow themselves to embrace. Philosophically, this principle reflects a profound truth about human connection. Intimacy cannot be coerced. It can only be invited. You cannot force a heart to open. You can only create conditions in which it wants to open on its own. And this requires mastery over your own impulses, the impulse to fix, to chase, to reassure, to persuade. By holding your own emotional center steady, you communicate without manipulation, speak without fear, and listen without judgment. This is the language that an avoidant heart understands intuitively. Practically, communicating without pressure looks like clarity paired with calm. It looks like expressing your needs directly without attaching them to blame or expectation. It looks like checking in, not interrogating. It looks like sharing your perspective, not demanding theirs. It means you speak your truth. B. You do not tie your value or security to their immediate response. This distinction is subtle, but transformative. It shifts your role from pursuer to partner, from anxious pleader to grounded presence. And here's the paradox. When you release the need to control or chase, when you offer communication as an invitation rather than a test, the avoidant heart begins to relax. Curiosity replaces fear. Engagement replaces withdrawal. And slowly, over time, trust begins to take root. This is the quiet power of non-pressured communication. It does not force intimacy, but it makes intimacy inevitable. So the takeaway is simple but profound. Speak with clarity, act with calm, and never allow your communication to feel like a trap. Your words, your tone, your presence, they are the bridge, not the chains. And when you master this, you give the avoidant heart something rare. Safety. Safety is the soil in which their defenses can soften, and connection can finally flourish. Remember this. No heart ever opens fully under pressure, but every heart responds to authenticity and calm. Speak in a way that invites, not demands, and you will see the avoidant walls start to lower, not because of persuasion, but because of the power of your presence. Once you've mastered understanding their fear, rooted yourself in self-respect, and learned to communicate without pressure, the next step is to realize the extraordinary power of action over words. Avoidant hearts are highly attuned to patterns, not promises. They don't measure love by grand declarations or eloquent speeches. They measure it by consistency, reliability, and authenticity. And this is where many people stumble. They think that saying the right thing, persuading, or emotionally pleading will break through walls. But words, no matter how heartfelt, are fleeting. Actions are the proof, the evidence, the silent language that troll. Think about it. An avoidant person has spent years, sometimes decades, learning that words can be empty, that promises can crumble, that intentions can pray. So when you say, I care about you, it may be interpreted as just another statement, easily dismissed. But when you show up consistently, respect their boundaries, honor your commitments, and act in alignment with your values, something shifts. The avoidant heart begins to notice not the words, but the patterns, the quiet, unwavering signals of reliability. This is the bridge between fear and trust. Actions do not pressure. They reassure. Actions do not demand. They invite. Actions speak louder than words ever could. Philosophically, this is profound because it reflects a universal truth about human connection. Trust cannot be built on theory. It can only be built on experience. To reach an avoidant heart, you must embody the principles you speak. You must live them. It's not enough to say, I respect your space. You must consistently honor it. It's not enough to say, I am here for you. You must show up when it matters. And it's not enough to say, I love you. You must demonstrate that love through the integrity of your actions. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to build a tangible track record of safety and reliability, a living proof that intimacy does not have to threaten them. Consider the subtle yet powerful ways actions create connection. Being punctual when you make plans, listening fully without judgment, responding with calm instead of frustration, maintaining your own emotional equilibrium even when they pull away. These are small gestures, but they accumulate into a pattern that the avoidant heart cannot ignore. Over time, they begin to internalize a new narrative. That closeness does not always mean suffocation. That vulnerability can exist without chaos, and that trust can be experienced rather than just hoped for. And here's the beauty of this approach. It frees you from the exhausting cycle of chasing and pleading. When your energy is focused on integrity rather than persuasion, on showing rather than telling, you reclaim your power and maintain your emotional balance. You become magnetic not because you demand attention, but because you embody reliability, consistency, and authenticity, the very qualities an avoidant heart longs for but rarely allows itself to trust. So the lesson is simple. Let your life speak louder than your words. Demonstrate rather than declare. Create a pattern of consistency, of presence, of quiet strength that the avoidant heart can witness without feeling pressured. The proof is not in promises. The proof is in action, repeated day after day, showing that love and respect are not fleeting. They are steady, reliable, and true. And remember this. No heart ever opens fully to words alone, but every heart responds to consistent, trustworthy action. Let your actions be the bridge, and you will find that even the most guarded heart begins to lower its defenses. Not because you chased, but because you showed. As you move forward, having understood their fear, anchored yourself in self-respect, communicated without pressure, and demonstrated consistency through your actions, the next step is to engage curiosity rather than conflict. This is where many people unknowingly sabotage connection. When an avoidant heart retreats, the instinct is to push harder, to argue, to question, to insist on clarity or reassurance. But these tactics, though understandable, almost always trigger the very response we're trying to avoid, deeper withdrawal. The truth is that avoidance is rooted in fear, and fear can never be met with confrontation. It can only be met with curiosity, patience, and calm exploration. Engaging curiosity is about approaching their world with genuine interest without trying to control it. It's the art of asking questions that invite dialogue rather than interrogation, of offering experiences that spark wonder rather than obligation, of listening with the intention to understand rather than to respond. Curiosity shifts the energy entirely. It communicates without saying it outright that you value them as a whole person, not as a problem to solve or a heart to win. And when an avoidant individual feels truly seen without pressure, a remarkable thing happens. They begin to lower their defenses voluntarily. Psychologically, this works because avoidance is a survival strategy, not a personality flaw. Avoidants are experts at reading energy. They sense tension, urgency, and meatiness immediately, and their instinct is to retreat. But when your presence is calm, your questions are gentle, and your engagement is driven by authentic curiosity rather than desperation, it interrupts the pattern. Suddenly, they are not responding to anxiety. They are responding to invitation. An invitation is vastly more powerful than demand because it leaves them free to choose connection rather than feeling coerced into it. Philosophically, engaging curiosity mirrors a broader principle of life. Transformation rarely comes from force. It comes from exploration. You cannot force a heart to open, but you can inspire it to explore, to question, to see that closeness is not a threat, but a choice. By modeling calm curiosity, you demonstrate a different way of being in relationship, a way that honors autonomy while creating space for intimacy. You show that connection can exist without pressure. And in doing so, you create the conditions under which true emotional closeness can flourish. In practical terms, this means cultivating experiences and conversations that invite them to participate rather than calm. Share ideas, thoughts, or experiences without demanding agreement. Explore shared activities that are light and engaging rather than loaded with emotional expectation. Ask open-ended questions that allow them to reveal themselves at their own pace. And most importantly, listen deeply without judgment or the urge to respond immediately. Curiosity is patient. It waits. And avoidants respond to patience more than any amount of pleading. The subtle genius of this approach is that it transforms the dynamic entirely. You are no longer chasing, you are no longer trying to pull them in. You are offering space, freedom, and respect. And paradoxically, this non-chasing stance makes them curious about you. They begin to wonder why you are so calm, so grounded, so intriguing. They begin to explore connection on their own terms. Curiosity, in this sense, is both the bridge and the invitation. It replaces pressure with possibility. So the key insight is simple. Do not try to fix, convince, or confront. Instead, engage with curiosity. Invite rather than demand. Explore rather than control. Your role is not to break down their walls by force, but to inspire them to open them on their own. And remember this, no heart ever opens willingly to conflict, but every heart responds to curiosity and gentle invitation. Let your presence inspire exploration, and you will find that even the most guarded hearts begin to move toward connection, not because you chased, but because you created a space where they can choose to come closer. Finally, after understanding their fear, grounding yourself in self-respect, communicating without pressure, demonstrating consistent action, and engaging curiosity rather than conflict. The last and perhaps most transformative step is embracing patience and emotional detachment. Now, I want to be clear. This does not mean indifference. It does not mean you SIDS, stop caring, or withdraw from the relationship. What it means is that you stop tying your sense of worth, your peace, and your happiness to the speed of their responsiveness or the intensity of their engagement. This is the essence of non-chasing. It is the art of holding your center while allowing them to come forward in their own time. Avoidant hearts are often shaped by patterns of abandonment, fear of engulfment, or emotional overwhelm. They have spent years learning that closeness can equal danger, and they instinctively resist when it feels imposed. No matter how much understanding, self-respect, clear communication, action, or curiosity you offer, forcing speed or outcomes only triggers retreat. Patience is the recognition that transformation unfolds according to their internal timeline, not yours. Detachment is the practice of allowing this process without making it a measure of your self-worth. Psychologically, this approach is incredibly powerful. When you release the need to control, you reduce the anxiety and tension that normally surround avoidant interactions. Your calm, centered presence signals safety. You are no longer a source of pressure, but a consistent, reliable anchor in a world where unpredictability often governs their relationships. Ironically, when you stop chasing, when you stop trying to manage their reactions or fix their resistance, you become far more magnetic. Avoidants respond to freedom. They respond to the demonstration that closeness can exist without demand, without desperation, and without compromise to your own values. Philosophically, patience and detachment reflect a deeper understanding of love itself. Love is not a transaction, a negotiation, or a pursuit. It is an offering. And the most compelling offering is one that is freely given without attachment to results. By cultivating patience, you model the principle that connect. They disappear because your presence the illusionary, not forced. By practicing detachment, you reinforce that your self-worth and fulfillment are intact regardless of external response. Together, these qualities create a dynamic in which an avoidant heart can safely explore intimacy without fear. Practically, patience and detachment manifest in subtle but profound ways. You show up when appropriate without overextending or overcompensating. You maintain your routines, friendships, and personal growth, signaling that your life is abundant and complete. You resist the temptation to overtext, overexplain, or overanalyze their every move. And when they pull back, you respond with calm acceptance rather than anxiety or frustration. This is not resignation. It is mastery. It is the ability to love without needing, to give without controlling, and to connect without chasing. The paradox here is remarkable. The more you practice patience and detachment, the more avoidants are drawn towards you. They sense a stability they rarely encounter, a presence that is non-threatening yet compelling. They begin to explore closeness at their own pace, not because they were pressured, but because they felt safe enough to do so. And in this space, true intimacy is possible, slow, deliberate, and sustainable. So the key insight is this: let go of urgency, release attachment to outcomes, and honor the pace of their heart. Your power lies not in chasing, but in holding your center and demonstrating that connection can exist without compromise. And remember this: no heart ever opens fully under pressure, but every heart responds to patience, freedom, and calm presence. Master these, and you will discover that even the most avoidant hearts can be reached, not because you chased them, but because you created the conditions in which they could safely come forward. So let's bring this all together. To reach an avoidant heart without chasing, it's not about persuasion, pressure, or proving your worth. It's about presence, patience, and mastery of your own emotions. It begins with understanding their fear, seeing the patterns of avoidance, not as rejection, but as a signal of their internal struggle. It continues with honoring yourself, cultivating self-respect, and demonstrating that your value does not depend on their approval. When you communicate without pressure, you create space. When you act with consistency, you show reliability. When you engage curiosity rather than conflict, you invite exploration instead of triggering retreat. And ultimately, it is patience and emotional detachment that allow connection to breathe. You stop chasing, stop trying to control outcomes, and instead hold a steady, grounded presence. A presence that says, I am whole, I am stable, I am here, and I honor your pace. Paradoxically, it is this very non-chasing, this calm mastery of self that draws the avoidant heart in. They are not won through demand. They are reached through demonstration, through presence, through patience. The lesson is profound and simple. Love is not a pursuit. It is an invitation. Connection is not forced. It is nurtured. The heart that fears closeness will never respond to pressure, but every heart responds to safety, respect, consistency, curiosity, and calm. By embodying these principles, you do more than reach an avoidant heart. You transform the dynamic entirely. You show that intimacy can exist without fear, that love can exist without compromise, and that true connection is a space of freedom, not a cage. So walk away from this knowing something powerful. You cannot chase love, but you can embody it. You cannot control someone else's heart, but you can create the conditions for it to open. You cannot rush trust, but you can demonstrate it every day in the choices you make, in the actions you take, and in the way you honor yourself and the other person. And here's the final truth.